Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and pass off the presenting to one of our developers, Brian Knudsen. He's going to go ahead and demo the features that we've got and walk you through what we've been doing.
All right, hello everyone. So today we're going to go through a few of our new features for 6.7. One of them was already released, and that's our Yosemite support. We support Yosemite for the worker, for the client, not yet the supervisor. So pretty much anything you're going to do except for the supervisor now runs on Yosemite. And just as a quick demo, here we have Yosemite running. Here's ArtistView and WranglerView, and we can submit a simple job. If I just do a test job, kind of the same thing that you would expect to happen happens. And if I just submit it back to my own self, there we go. There we have jobs running kind of the whole chain through Yosemite. So there's proof of that. The next thing we'll go through are kind of a list of features that one of our other developers did. To make it easier, we've kind of pre-recorded this, so I'll just play this through, and then we'll get into our last set of features with the latest improvements to ArtistView. So here are these.
Now I'm going to demo a new feature which makes it easier to submit jobs that will only start at empty workers. You can use the Use All Cores checkbox in a lot of the submission interfaces and not have to specify how many processors that you need free on a machine. It will basically only start on machines that have nothing running on them. This is especially handy on farms that are comprised of workers with different numbers of available slots. So if you have a mix of 8 and 16 core machines, you don't have to say only start on something with 16 cores or only start on something with 8. So here I've got a machine with one open slot. It's running something that's consuming 7 of them, and then I've got a completely empty worker over here. So I'm going to submit a job, and I'll shorten this up a bit. 5. And I'm going to say the render all cores checkbox is already checked, and in the requirements section is where it's actually happening. There is this only start on an empty worker checkbox. I can just check that, and it adds this host.processors used equals 0 requirement. Something that's no processors used. This has always been in Qube. It's just never really been exposed to make it easy to find. If you're submitting jobs via the API, building jobs in a pipeline tool, you can use this feature as well and just add that string to the requirements, and I will submit it. And I'll find that it will actually start running on my laptop, the one with the head note that was completely empty. There we go, it's running on that, and should be just about done. There we go. Now I'm going to demonstrate a new feature which will allow you to modify a job's environment after it's been submitted. I'm going to submit a job right now with 3 environment variables set, food, 2, and 3, and the job is really only going to print out those values. Here I see that here's the value set. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to modify those values in a new widget down here. So I can change food to, I can change its value to something else. I can add a new environment. And so if I look, I've got the 3 variables right here. I can add a new one. Let's just say that. And I can also see it'll show up in the list now, especially if you typo it. And then I can delete an existing environment variable. Food 3 will disappear. So there we go. And I can name an existing variable. I'm going to rename that one and call it. There's my new list. I can check its values if I like. All looks good. I'm going to modify. These won't take effect. They won't modify an instance that's currently running. You'll need to actually interrupt it to get it to get off the machine and then back on again. So I'll interrupt it here, and then it'll get kicked off the machine, and then it will go running again. Now it's running again. If I look in the logs, I will see the new values applied down here. And that's about that.
All right. So lastly, we'll talk about some improvements to ArtistView. little bit of background. We've got WranglerView. We've had WranglerView for quite a long time. ArtistView was a new tool that was introduced a couple years ago. We're trying to migrate all the functionality from WranglerView into ArtistView, and we'll make ArtistView kind of the only interface that's available for Qube. It will have multiple layouts, so it'll still be a handy tool for wranglers as well as artists, and then we might actually even put in some producer tools in there as well, customizable layouts and the whole thing. But that's quite a large project, so we're doing it step by step. The first step we're doing is taking submission out of WranglerView, which is where it only exists now, and putting it into ArtistView so that ArtistView has its own submission UI. In doing that, we have the opportunity to make some improvements to WranglerView's submission that we've been wanting to do for years and haven't really had the ability to, simply because of the architecture behind it. So now we're giving you the ability to not only rearrange the parameters as they're seen in the dialog box, even the default parameters that would be things like priority and job name, but we're also allowing you to do things like hide different parameters that you don't want your artist to see, or disable the parameter so they can see that it's there and see a value that's there, but they can't actually make a change to it. So those come from a lot of customer requests that we've had over the years, and finally, again, we're getting a chance to implement them. Let me just bring up my development virtual machine. There we go. And so here's a quick submission UI. Now, we are still developing this, so the colors aren't correct and the spacing isn't correct. We haven't really paid any attention to that. It's all just functional at this point in time. But to give you some idea of the background, or give you some idea of how this is all working, I've got a submission UI set up here, and I have the new simple command language, essentially. It's all Python still, but the new simple command scripting methods that will create this submission UI. So I'll show you the kind of the down and dirty, and then we'll talk about how you'll actually start using our central preferences system that are coming in with this. Talk about that in just a second, and you'll see how you'll be able to modify the submission UI with that. So, looking again at a dialog, here's a dialog. We've got typical parameters that you would see on all interfaces up at the top, and the arrangement of this, again, it may change, but just for functionality purposes, we've got things like job name and priority. You'll see these in every single submission UI. There's other things like the advanced job flags that you would have seen in WranglerView as well. They're just in a different place. They're in tabs now, so they're kind of easier to get to. You don't have such a huge submission dialog anymore. And again, all this stuff is customizable, so if you don't want the flight checks to show up here, you can have them show up in the top, or you can create your own tab for them and put them over there, or you can disable them completely. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be creating your own submission UI, all of these things will be here for every submission UI. The stuff that you're doing is in this application-specific tab. It's named application-specific by default. You can rename it if you'd like. But let me just look at a way that you would define this. Again, we're talking about the programming side, so the scripting side of all this. If you have programmers in-house, then they will find this incredibly useful. If you don't have programmers in-house, then you might want to just see that this is possible, but then the next topic will be more interesting to you. In any event, the application-specific parameters are the things that you would be creating, and it's a simple Python dictionary. So, for example, if we look at the first application-specific parameter, it's a parameter called nuke version in this particular submission UI, and it has 4 different fields: the major, minor, the build, and then also the operating system. So the way that you'll define that is you'll give the parameter a label. The name is some sort of an internal thing. And I put it in a group called primary parameters. You'll see here we have groups that are collapsible. This is similar to WranglerView submission UIs. It has some sort of a collapsible feature to it. This is kind of replicating that. Maybe a little bit easier to see, maybe not. But we have, you'll define again the label, and then you'll define a list of fields. So again, we've got 4 different fields here, and I've got my first field is a major version, and it's an integer type, and it has you define a range, and pretty similar, or pretty self-explanatory. But then there's a callback language that exists in between these as well. So I can say, you'll see here, I changed the nuke version, and then this field changes as well. So this is all kind of defined inside this script here with things like these functions. So I might say that the nuke path, which is that second parameter here, nuke path is watching some other parameters. So I'm going to watch to see if any of these guys change, and if they do, I'm going to call this function, and that function will just have the recipe for creating this path here. So again, this is all if you're doing any sort of custom scripting or making your own submission UIs. This is kind of the way that you'll do it. We're just trying to make it all very flexible, and it's all very model view controllers. So all you're doing is writing the model, the kind of the things that define the UI, and then the UI has logic behind it that kind of does everything else for you. So that's the basic of how you create one. Now the next step is the thing that I think you'll find more interesting, which is our whole central preferences system. It's still in development, so I can't really show it to you in firsthand, but we'll just talk about it and you can kind of see what's going on. The idea here is that if you're familiar with WranglerView or even ArtistView as it sits now, there is a whole concept of central preferences. So in those central preferences, we'll hold everything from which columns are displayed in the job list to, most importantly, I would say, are the default parameters for everything in all of your submission UIs. So in WranglerView now, if you wanted to set up central preferences, you would set up your preferences, then you would save them out to some sort of a central preferences file, and then you have to make every other submission UI or every other WranglerView in your facility look at those central preferences. So it's a multi-step process. So we're trying to simplify that in the future and make the central preferences stored on the supervisor, on or near the supervisor, and then they'll be auto-discovered by ArtistView or by whatever this interface is called in the future. So as soon as you fire it up, it'll find those preferences for you automatically and apply those preferences right away. So that makes the whole concept of setting up central preferences easier, but then how we're going to make it more powerful is that in those central preferences, we will allow you to do things like turn off a field. So if I don't want my artists or students to see this farm concurrency field, I can just simply turn it off and it won't be displayed at all. The other option is I might want to set it to some default and never allow them to change it. So at least they can see that there's a setting there, but they can't change it. So it would just be disabled. So they'd still see 10 here, they'd still see -1 here, but then the widget tree wouldn't actually do anything. And then again, we'd be able to move things around. So if I don't want these parameters to necessarily be in a tab called application specific, I can move them out and just put them right in the top here. Maybe we don't want our students or our artists to be able to have access to any of this stuff except for the things that are absolutely necessary, like, for example, the nuke script. Like maybe we'll hard code in the nuke path, maybe we'll only allow them nuke script, and maybe we only want that to be in the top, and that's it. That's completely possible. And the last thing about the central preferences is that they're based not only on the single submission UI with which you're dealing, but you can also say across the entire facility. So, for example, if I wanted to set every job for every submission that was made to Qube to have a priority of, let's say, 500, I would just set it to 500, set it as a universal default, and it'll go through all submission UIs. So you don't have to go through for every single application that you support and make that default setting for each one of those. So that's about the 10,000-foot overview of what we're doing here with the new submission UIs. Those, again, will go into ArtistView for Qube 6.7, and then as we move on further, we'll take the other features that are in WranglerView and move them into ArtistView, give it a new name, and that'll be your interface moving forward. So with that, I'll hand it back to Scott, and we'll go with any questions that any of you might have.
Great, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. So just wanted to see if any of you who are online, we also have some people viewing the streaming broadcast. If you wanted to go ahead and ask any questions, you can use chat. Since there's not a lot of folks online with us right now to where it would be too confusing, can just unmute your microphone, ask any questions you may have, or if there's any feedback or anything. Don't everybody jump in at once. No, I'm joking. So I think if it looks like we don't have any questions, I think motivation. Okay, so we got questions.
Actually, you know what? We have a question. These are the guys from Image Engine, Chris, Kareem, and Gino. But Kareem has a question.
Hey, so basically, more interested to do with the environment, changing the environment variables. That feature, the first one that you demoed.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So Brian, hey, is that like basically? I just want to make sure maybe my hopes are a little bit too high here. I think I spoke to Shinya about it earlier in the year. But basically, does that environment variable mean I can change memory and cores on the fly?
No, it's strictly the runtime environment variables in the job's execution environment.
Okay. So, like, give me an example as to how that would be useful for us.
Do you use job environment? Do you use environment variables in your scripts that run on the workers?
Yep.
Would you like to be able to modify them after the job has been submitted to change the behavior of the job halfway through?
But does that affect running or just newly started jobs?
Newly started, you would have to interrupt them if you wanted to reset it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
Welcome.
Yes, so there's also the question from JF about the moving away from WranglerView, and it is a little bit because the widgetry, I guess the WX widgets that run WranglerView are a little bit antiquated. We've run into some problems with them, simply because they're not really supporting it as much anymore, and some of the features that we'd like to do are really difficult to implement under that. PyQt seems to be a little bit more widely accepted. It's a pretty good architecture, and not only that, it's just that the way that WranglerView was built, it was built quite a long time ago. We've learned a lot of things since then, and it seemed like a clearer path to start from mostly scratch and start with a new architecture than it was to revamp the old one. You also get darker colors with ArtistView.
It's more artistic.
Yes.
Anybody else have any other questions? Okay. Well, I think we're pretty much done at this point. We didn't want to take up too much of your time on a Friday, and we are planning to do these demos a little bit more frequently, to get any feedback that we can, show you guys what we're up to, what the next release will contain. So the plan at this point is to try and do 2 demos per release. We're trying to move to more of a standard release cycle where we'd be releasing every 10 weeks. So for any one release, we'd like to do 2 client demos. So we hope to do another demo. We'll schedule it in a month from today and look through some of the other features that we talked about. There are some things that we had planned for this demo that didn't exactly make it, and most likely those will be at the top of our list for the demo we'll do in a month from now. And again, we'll reach out to you and hope to get your feedback. And if you have any questions or anything comes up from what you saw, you can feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'll go ahead and see what we can do to address your concern. We do have another question. Network-based installs for WranglerView on Windows.
Well, as in some sort of an automatically deployable thing, the solution that we found is to use the installer and run the installer with a Kickstart file, and then do that through some sort of a distribution system, like a PSExec, for example. While we have talked about doing allowing Qube to update itself, that I think is still quite a long ways away. At least it won't be in the next release. But we do hope that sometime in the future you'd be able to use Qube to update Qube, if that answers your question. Oh, I see. Yeah, to clarify, so the continuation of that question is a zero footprint on the workstation. In other words, install WranglerView in one location and then have everyone use it from that location, if I understand correctly. If that's the case, maybe John or Shinya can step in. I believe that's already possible. I believe you can. Yeah, there you go. I believe that you can install it in one location and then run it from there. I believe we have a few of our customers who do that. The installer doesn't like you to do that, but I believe it still works.
Yeah, you just simply you install it in one location and just copy it up.
Yeah.
Installer is a zip file.
So we also have a question that was submitted from one of the streaming viewers.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and answer that now. Andy Jones wanted to know is there a way to modify the job package?
That's on our roadmap, and I think it's coming up in this release or the next one. We have that as one of our features on the roadmap. I can find out right now.
Thank you.
It is on our roadmap, but we don't have an ETA for it. If we find that we get a lot of people, we had people ask for it a few years ago, and then the interest seems to have dropped off on it. But if we get people asking for it again, and somebody just did, then we can bump it back up.
I think Image Engine actually, Kareem asked for it.
Yeah, Kareem asked for it.
Too, so.
Okay. That gets. All right, I'll talk to Scott about the timing of that one then, because it's not the first time this has come up. Okay, Kareem, I'll get back to you. Thanks.
Like I said, we got that question from Andy Jones.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So it's coming from multiple people. I'll just tag this so that it comes up on our radar again.
So we got another question that Andy's submitting on behalf of Tony Barbieri. Can we distribute the Qube Python API on the network?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, we have other clients that do that as well. We have several clients that have a zero footprint for everything, all the binaries, API, and the WranglerView and ArtistView.
So that would again be a matter of installing Qube core somewhere and then copying the core into one location. If you have to support multiple operating systems, then you'll need to probably install core on each one of those operating systems and copy the correct .so file from each operating system back into the Python API.
No, then you'll still need to make sure that your Python path points to the correct location, but most people will manage that with wrapper scripts of one sort or another.
Thanks for the questions, Andy. I appreciate it. I know there's a little bit of delay in the stream, so you'll hear that about 20 seconds after I said it. Well, I think then maybe now, if we're through with questions, then I think we'll be finished. Like I said, we'll go ahead and follow up with you with the email and the survey, and at any point, if you need to reach out to us about anything, feel free, and we'll do what we can to answer your questions. So, thanks everybody, and hopefully we'll see you in a month.
That's all.
Thank you.